So I had been out of DOE for about 10 years, but I had been a contractor supporting DOE for much of that time. So my contact with the department remained strong throughout that time. I had contracts with not just nuclear energy, but environmental management, with the NNSA in the Nonproliferation and International Safeguards area, Office of Policy. I did work for science. So a fairly well-rounded experience with the different DOE offices. Plus, I had the benefit of having worked with about 300 federal employees in new production reactors, and when that program was canceled, those 300 employees were dispersed throughout the department. So I had contacts in almost every office of DOE, and that was good for helping Clyde Jupiter build his business. But when I came back to DOE in 2002, I came into nuclear energy. That's where my first love was. And as I mentioned, I went into accelerator transmutation of waste, which had a lot of new challenges that I had not experienced in reactor development. However, I did have experience in accelerators, so that helped. My postgraduate studies at Monterey at the Naval Postgraduate School involved a linear accelerator, electron LINAC, about 100 MeV power at Monterey. And life is full of surprises, obviously. My professors at Monterey had been at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and a few years after I was trained there, Dr. Burton Richter of SLAC won a Nobel Prize for physics in some experiments on quarks that he did at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. And coincidentally, in 2002, here he was as the leader of an advisory committee to the program I was now involved in, the accelerator transmutation of waste. And he remains the advisor, even though we've shifted from accelerator-based transmutation to reactor-based transmutation R&D. And he did not know a lot about nuclear power when he first started working with us, but a Nobel laureate, he was a pretty quick study, and he is very, very insightful and has given us very good advice over the years, and I still have a very good relationship with him. But he was like one of my heroes and role models as a physics student, and now here I am working with him, and that's one of the joys of this career I've had. Well, let me go back to the scientists and engineers at the national laboratories in particular. In this fuel cycle R&D program, we've selected leaders from the national labs to run the various technical areas in our program. And so these are subject matter experts. They're acknowledged experts, not just in the US, but globally. They're the cream of the crop. Plus they're good managers, because all of them are in management positions in their own organizations. And I've really enjoyed working with them and the teams that they've built that support this program. And that's been very, very rewarding, because I think management of technical people is a skill I learned early in the Navy. It was something I felt I was good at, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's still probably the thing I get the most joy out of. In the fuel cycle R&D program and its predecessors, we also worked with universities. We had some earmarks early in the program for both the University of Nevada, Las Vegas and the Idaho Accelerator Center, which over 2 or 3 years of earmarks, we integrated them into our research teams from the national labs, and they became major players. And so we were able to convince Congress to do away with the earmarks, and we continued to support those universities in the program as major contributors to the R&D program, and that continues to this day. We also sponsored a fellowship program at the master's degree level, and that's been a very successful program also, and I've enjoyed very much watching the young students work with the funding we give them to get a degree, maybe go to a national lab, maybe continue in the university system and get a doctorate, maybe go to industry. But they come back in one position or another and thank us for our contribution, and that always makes us feel good. And now that we've revamped our university program even more from the past, we've changed it to catch up with the times and meet the needs of the nation today. The NEUP, Nuclear Energy University Program, Dr. Miller, the former Assistant Secretary, and Dennis Spurgeon before him, both have insisted that 20% of the R&D budget go to our university program. And I've been a supporter of that, and I've tried to give my input to help improve the program over the 3 years it's been working, and I think we've got it addressing all of the major issues from the university professors. So I find that to be a very successful program, as well as the NERI program before it, the Nuclear Energy Research Initiative. Now, I was involved with that even though I wasn't a Fed at the time. I was a Jupiter employee, and Frank Ross was assigned to develop this program. In 1998, the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy R&D budget reached its nadir, zero. Zero money for R&D. And I had helped the leaders in the office develop their budget request, and it didn't work. We didn't get any money. The following year, there was a PCAST, President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology report. John Ahern, who is a strong proponent of nuclear energy, former NRC commissioner and chairman, he had some language in that report that was very critical of the fact that we weren't doing any nuclear R&D, and he gained support within the White House. In the following year, our budget started going back up because of this Nuclear Energy Research Initiative that had been recommended by John Ahern and others. And John Herzig, by the way, was in charge of the initial development of that program. And Frank Ross was the leader in developing the mechanics of how to operate it. It started out as a program that invited proposals not just from universities but from laboratories and industry. And it involved basic as well as applied science and technology.
From that program, did that lead to any directed research programs?
Yes, sure. It did, but I wanted to focus on the university component. After 3 or 4 years, it was decided to modify the NERI program and only allow the universities to compete. They were allowed to bring in teaming partners from industry or labs, but the NERI funds would not go to those entities. They could help contribute. So the NERI program was university-based for several years, and the amount we put in each year varied. But in around 2008 or 2007 or 8 was when we first started this NEUP idea, where 20% of our budget, which was a lot more than previously, goes into the university program. And the university folks are just as great to work with as the laboratory people. They put out a new crop of bright, sharp, energetic young people every year that come into the programs around the country and keep us technically superior. And we need to do that. We need to continue that way of doing things in order to stay competitive with the rest of the world. You know, you look around what's happening today, and we're losing our leadership in nuclear energy. The American vendors of reactor equipments, most of them have gone out of business because there's no new construction in the U.S. And the foreign vendors are getting all the work in China, India, United Arab Emirates. The Koreans won contracts for 4 reactors in the UAE at the beginning of this year. They were never considered a major power, but they are now. We need to remain competitive, and the department's objective in the office to help promote new builds is probably the key activity we're involved in right now. Now, I don't work in those reactor areas directly, but in the fuel cycle area, we have interface and common objectives with all of the reactor teams. So we're integrated in many ways and work together in the promotion of nuclear energy, which is the mission of the Office of Nuclear Energy. We're the only government agency that promotes nuclear power. The NRC doesn't do it, they're the regulator. The National Academy of Sciences, National Science Foundation, they're interested in basic research more than applied. Other organizations in DOE have different missions. It's only our office, Nuclear Energy, that's promoting nuclear energy.
Right.
So,
So do you think it's important that the government develop technology in order to be relevant in the world, and so that there's something to export?
yes, I think that the department has a role. We should work with industry, because industry eventually will be on the hook for the financial risk in building and operating anything that gets developed. We can help primarily in the long-term risky R&D area. The commercial industry is generally not willing to take the financial risk in that risky R&D area. And so we're really good at that at our national labs. And we want to partner with industry so that what our laboratories produce or help produce can be of value to the industry. So we got some good experience in the 2006 through 2009 timeframe in the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership Program, which I was a part of. And we were promoting the design and construction of large recycling facilities and fast reactors. Other countries had started getting into that business, and we felt at that time, in order to help meet waste management goals, that this was the best path forward. Now, the program was not successful, but those 3 years we worked very closely with the industry teams, including vendors, including utilities, and others. And we've tried to retain that close contact with industry through other contracting mechanisms in the fuel cycle R&D program, so that the industry knowledge and experience can be added to the research team's knowledge and experience at the laboratories. And so I think that partnership is very important, and I want it to continue as we invest our research money into advanced technologies, looking for successes that can be commercially viable. So that's
So
our.
that was an example of an effective public-private partnership model.
I think so, yes.
For technology development.
Right. And so we're using the industry teams today, not in design work, because we're not ready to initiate new designs, but in helping guide the R&D program so that the R&D can seek long-term goals that will help the commercialization of the products that it's working on.
How does that occur? I mean, are you able to provide, does industry provide the funding for this themselves, or are you able, is there a role for government in funding industry involvement?
What we did in our program was create a contract called Advice and Assistance Contract, and we invited teams from the industry to compete. Last year we awarded 6 contracts to 6 different industry teams, several of which had been working with us on the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, plus a few new ones. And we provide the funds for them to participate in meetings with our technical working groups, to offer their experience to the extent that they're willing to